Hey there, everybody. I'm Conor McCreery, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Conor McCreery about The Last Witch, Trickster, and more. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Conor has written for Dynamite, Boom, Titan, and DC Comics. He's probably best known as the co-creator of Kill Shakespeare, the swashbuckling tale published by IDW, which has been adapted for the stage and is being developed for television. Past is Prologue, Juliet is the 5th chapter in the award-winning series. His current graphic novel is The Last Witch series for Boom. His upcoming project is Trickster. Trickster is described as a funny, fast-paced horror comedy series, sometimes dark look at a man who never believed he could be a leader until he finally chooses to become one. Pouring the perfect pint of Guinness used to be his greatest concern, but like it or not, Roy realizes he's the one who will determine the future of two worlds. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Conor McCreery about The Last Witch, Trickster, and more. So, Conor McCreery, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, John. I appreciate it. It's good. It's good to be back and chatting. It's been a little while.
Absolutely, for sure. No, it's good to chat with you, and I appreciate your time. So, before we get started, though, I want to ask you, who are you reading today? Who's on your bedside reading table?
Let's see. I am reading. I'm catching up on Saga with Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah.
I am reading. I'm actually reading some IDW reprints of these European comics, Corto Maltese.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of like he's sort of this kind of like piratey, like gun for hire type guy. It's Hugo Pratt did it. It's kind of it's classic books. So I've been reading those, which are really cool.
Nice.
I've been reading Marjorie Liu's Monstrous. Like I'm way behind on that, but I kind of picked those up. Yeah. Actually only the first couple trades. And then actually I've been reading, my wife and I are actually working on a graphic novel, and I've got a couple young kids, and we're actually working on something that would be sort of a middle-aged reader. And so I've been reading a lot of those kind of like books. So I've been reading like Raina Telgemeier, and I've been reading like Real Friends and Best Friends by Shannon Hale.
Oh yeah.
And Veronica, what is her name? Victoria Jameson. She does All's Fair in middle school, and she also did Roller Girl. I think her stuff is actually really good. She's a really talented storyteller. So yeah, nice. That's kind of the stuff that I can think of that's most closely at hand. We were reading some Lumberjanes today to my daughter. So yeah, it's kind of fun. We're kind of going through a whole bunch of the greatest hits of that middle grade stuff.
Good stuff. Well, it sounds like you're keeping busy, that's for sure.
Trying to, for sure.
Good. Well, I want to talk about your most current project, which is The Last Witch graphic novel. Now, I know we spoke about the individual issues that were coming out in the past, but now they're been collected into a graphic novel. So I'm wondering, for those who aren't familiar with the story, how would you describe it to them?
Sure. So The Last Witch is, it's a fairy tale, right? It's a fairy tale story. So it's the kind of story that if you like things like the Grimm's Fairy Tales, or Wind, which came out not too long ago by Boom, or Secret of Nim, or The Dark Crystal. It's that kind of story. It's about a young woman, Saoirse. She's 12 years old, just turned, and she decides to sort of go on this quest to prove that she's brave and special by going deep into the woods and finding what's supposed to be the crumbling remnants of a witch's tower. And she does this with this other little boy in the village, and they're kind of racing each other. And the net effect is she finds a lot more than she bargains for. There actually is a witch living in this tower, and Saoirse survives the encounter. But when she comes back home to the village, she finds that the village has been destroyed, and everyone, including her father, is gone. And the only people left are her brother, who kind of tagged along on this adventure, and her grandmother, who sort of lives out in the woods and is kind of considered this very odd woman. And so Saoirse has to go on this quest to try to stop this coven of witches that destroyed her village from, basically destroying all of Ireland. And this is all set in medieval Ireland. And the reason they destroyed the village is because they were looking for her. And the reason she survived this encounter is the reason they were looking for her, because Saoirse has this strange birthmark, which always was something that people had used to sort of say that she was strange and that she was, marked by the devil, and it kind of made her an outcast. But in truth, it's a witch mark. And what that means is that she can access the raw stuff of magic that kind of crackles around Ireland, but it also gives her some protection against these witches. And so, yeah, it's a classic quest story. If you like things like Avatar, I think it's got some Avatar DNA for sure. And yeah, it's a kind of that, I like to say it's from 9 to 99. It's a perfect book to give a 9, 10, 11-year-old, even older though. But also it's the sort of thing that you can read as an adult. And if you just enjoy that kind of classic coming of age quest fairy tale story, you'll definitely like it. And and it is at times it gets a little dark, not in terms of like being violent or language, but a big part of Saoirse's journey is as she goes, she becomes more powerful. In a lot of ways, what she's really fighting is this desire that she has to be special and to be more than the outcast girl who lives in the smallest house in the village. And once she starts to become special by wielding this power, it becomes very possible that this power is going to corrupt her and that she might, kind of join the coven before everything is said and done. And so that our protagonist may end up being the antagonist by the end of our story. Okay. Yeah, so that's stretches us a bit past book one, but book one is really takes Saoirse from when she gets her powers, and we see her in battle against 3 members of this coven. Mm-hmm. And as we go through each battle, she's tested. We see what she has to sacrifice, and we see her grow more powerful. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. V Glass was the artist on it. They did an unbelievable job. This book is so beautiful. It is such a beautiful book. V has outdone themselves. It's an incredible book. We're just in the process of getting ready to do book 2. And, COVID kind of had us delayed a teeny bit. And so my number one fear was like other publishers were going to be like seeing this book and being like, let's get V Glass on our books. And V was going to be like, I know we're doing book 2, but like, I don't know when. So now I'm drawing like, I don't know, like, Young Justice League or something like that. Right. They're just at another level. They're so amazing.
Sure. Well, looking back, it sounds like it turned out well, but looking back, how do you think that project turned out from the outset when you originally started to write it and plan it out?
It's funny. So The Last Witch was something I pitched to Boom. I'd done Adventure Time regular show books with them, including the Adventure Time regular show crossover graphic novel available at Amazon. And so they'd reached out to me and asked me to, just pitch them some ideas because they'd enjoyed working with me. Mm-hmm. And what was really interesting about that was, so I sent them a whole bunch of ideas. And I'm normally the kind of person who has like a lot of, like, I do a lot of prep on my pitches. There's mm-hmm. lots of information. I normally have like, oh, here's the 9, here's the story of the world and all the other stuff. And this was actually a story that was based on a piece of prose writing I had done for a friend's charity book. And so all I really had was just the beginning, like a little girl goes into the forest, looking to find, prove her bravery by finding this old crumbling, tower in the middle of the woods that nobody goes to because they think it's haunted, and finds a witch and survives. And so the rest of it, I really didn't have anything. And so I gave them all these pitches, and then I was like, well, I do have that like witch thing, and like, I don't know, it could be kind of fun. And so I said, oh, there's going to be this Eater of the World villain that she's going to have to defeat, and I put in a twist, for the story that I don't want to spoil, obviously, but I didn't really know how the twist was going to work. I was just like, oh, that would be a fun twist. And of course, that was the one they picked. And so they're like, this was like a Thursday or a Friday, and they're like, yeah, let's have a call on Monday, and you can like walk us through, like, we're so interested in how that twist works, like, tell us more about this villain. And like that weekend was I was just like at my computer trying to be like, oh crap, like, well, what is this story? Like, I don't know. So from that perspective, it's been really, and that weekend, to give myself credit, I guess, like I was able to figure out some stuff that made me really excited about it. But it was still like really rough. So I would say compared to where the story began to see where it is now, now I have this kind of thought of like, well, I know where this book could keep going. Like I know what the next story would be. I know what our new hero would have to find. Like I know more about the fairyland and where this eater of the world comes from and how they came to power and how that could be interesting. And so it's been really cool to see the mythology of the world build itself out. So from that perspective, it's certainly outstripped what I originally thought, when I first put that paragraph together. But what really makes the book, and I mentioned it before, but what really makes the book like far jump past what I, imagined originally is V's work, and also Natalia Starenko, who's the colorist. Every once in a while you get a colorist and an artist who just sing together, and those two, they sing, man, they sing. And it's just, every time I get pages, every page is something that like delights me, and so it's such a, I've been lucky in my career. I've almost always worked with artists where I've been like, wow, like I'm blown away by this work. But this really does take it to almost a whole new level, something beyond I could have imagined.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. So you hinted about it, but it sounds like you've got more story to tell. There's more going on with these characters. So do you think you can perceive this going on for more books down the road?
Well, I mean, we originally made a deal to do 2 books in the series to start with, and then it's kind of like it's like everything in comics. Like, so let's see where we're at, right?
Right. Yeah.
Book 1 and book 2 do business, and there's an audience out there that's like, we want more adventures. Then yeah, for sure. Like I know exactly what I would do with book 3. I figured out what the big quest would be. I figured out the emotional beats between the characters and how things change. And there's some really cool stuff that I would love to do. But yeah, I know exactly what I would want to do. Will we get past to book 3 or book 2? Sorry, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'll encourage your audience to go out there and pick it up and see for themselves if they think it's something that they feel should have a long run. I mean, I'm biased. I think so. I'm really proud of it. But yeah, we'll see. But definitely, yeah, like book 2 has been written. We have a deal with Boom to continue to do the book. So knock on wood, that'll all roll along shortly. But yeah, it's I hope we get to do more in it, because I think there's a lot of really interesting story that could keep going into it. But that's one of the things, like, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this world is, with things like Kickstarter and Zoop and these crowdfunding platforms, is, there are more and more creators who kind of can find that one passionate fan base and sort of say, hey, like, maybe this wasn't a for everybody thing, but it's a for you guys thing, and there's enough of you guys, so let's keep going. But
right, yeah,
who knows? That's putting the cart ahead of the horse. Definitely, I'm
sure.
What I would be most happy with is that book 1, which came out on Wednesday and hits bookstores next week, is that if book 1 and book 2 did the kind of business where I know Boom really likes the book, but if it does the kind of book business where Boom's like, let's keep going, that's obviously the best scenario.
Right, exactly.
They're such a great publisher.
Yeah, sounds like it, for sure. Now, I know you got another book. I was reading online that you've got another one on the go called Trickster. So if you could talk a bit about that, maybe what the story is and maybe what the origin of it as well.
Sure. I mean, it's really funny. So Trickster is a story that I started putting together with my buddy Neil Gibson, who listeners might know from Twisted Dark is the series he does. He actually runs his own boutique publishing company called TPub in the UK. It's fantastic stuff. It's basically Twisted Dark is basically like the Twilight Zone if every Twilight Zone episode was somehow interconnected and was building to a bigger story. Mm-hmm. And it's all kind of creepy. Like, it's called Twisted Dark for a reason, right? Every story's got an M. Night kind of whoa, what? And they're all kind of delving into the shadowy nature of humankind. So Neil and I have been kicking around this idea, Trickster, for a long time. So Trickster is basically, weirdly enough, because we've been working on this for 10 years, and now, of course, it comes out now, it's also a Celtic fairy tale story.
Oh, okay.
So I've got these 2 Irish fairy tale books coming out like 2 days apart from each other, which is such a weird, like, not certainly you wouldn't plan it to have 2 things right beside each other, but also 2 Irish things. But I guess it kind of makes for a neat companion piece. And honestly, if I continue with Last Witch, I'm going to steal some of the backstory from Trickster and pour it into it.
Okay.
Because so Trickster is basically about this master of illusion, Rory. And he lives in Boston. He's got this dive bar that he runs with his friends, this misfit group of ne'er-do-wells. And he's very much a Robin Hood type character. He likes to help the people in the neighborhood. He's best friends with a Catholic priest. And so when some of the parishioners are in trouble, the priest turns to Rory and is like, Rory, can you do something? When we first meet him, he's playing a game of poker against a local kind of a crime boss, I guess, and he's playing a game of poker because he's trying to win back this gold watch that belongs to somebody else. Now, this all seems kind of, very, very standard. The what's different about all this is his band of misfits at the bar is they're all creatures from the fairylands. And Rory himself is a leprechaun. Now, here's the thing that we've got to let you know. Leprechauns have been grossly misrepresented in pop culture.
Really?
They are actually, yes, it's actually really funny. So leprechauns are actually children of the sun god, the Irish sun god named Lugh. The reason they love gold is because gold is a representation, because of the way it looks, of the sun on Earth. And leprechauns in classic Irish mythology are tall, beautiful creatures. They are not tiny and short. They're not starring in 8 mediocre horror films. They're not hawking Lucky Charms. Somehow it's kind of like Santa Claus. Coca-Cola kind of invented the red suited fat jolly man. The original Santa Claus stories, that's not what he looks like. Mm-hmm. And in the original Celtic mythology, no, the leprechauns aren't that. But somehow they morphed into it somewhere in the 40s, I guess. So we like to have a little fun with, like, when people find out he's a leprechaun, they're like, you're not what I expected. But, when Neil and I were sitting there, we're like, well, how on earth did this go wrong? Like, how did they go from being the children of the sun god to these weird, short, gnarly dudes? And we're like, must be illusion. That must be how they want to be portrayed. And so we have a lot of fun. And so, Rory is this character. When he's touching gold, he can cast illusions. And at the really far reaches of his power, Rory could convince you, John, that you were in a room filled with water. And it would be so convincing that your brain would believe you were drowning and eventually shut down all your systems. And that would be the end of you. Mm-hmm. Now, Rory would never do that because he's on the side of the angels. But that's like the far interesting reaches of his power. And so basically what Trickster is, it's a monster of the week type adventure. Each arc sees Rory facing some sort of dark creatures from the fairylands, him and his team. It's horror comedy, Shaun of the Dead, The Goon, Army of Darkness. But, depending on the reaction to the project, Neil and I have done a lot of thinking. I mean, we literally worked on this for a decade. We have all these massive spreadsheets. Wow. And we know exactly where we'd ultimately like these Monster of the Week stories to build to, because Rory fled the homelands, the fairylands. And he fled from the homelands having stolen something. And he's been in hiding, both that and what he stole, he's hidden away. He does not want anybody to find him. He doesn't want anybody to find what he stole, because if they do, it could mean the end of both his homelands, the fairylands, but also our world as well.
Oh, okay.
And so the first arc, we're actually, so what we're doing is we're actually doing a crowdfunding campaign for issue number 1. The full trade is basically done. The series artist Veronica Saraceno, who's this very talented Italian artist who's working with Agnese Bozza, they've got about 75 to 80% of the book is drawn and colored already. And so we just thought it'd be fun to crowdsource the first issue, give our fan bases a chance to kind of see and dip their toes into the story world first. But also there's a lot of really fun exclusive covers, exclusive offers. You can have your name written into the story, where we're talking about maybe doing some cool variant covers, because Rory is a master of illusion. A cool variant cover where you see Rory and then there's a mirror, and then it would be your face in the mirror, because that's who he's glamoring himself to be. So these are all just kind of cool stuff that will only be available in this crowdfunding campaign with Zoop.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that before. I've never heard of Zoop before. I've certainly heard Kickstarter, but what is Zoop? Can you tell me why you chose that to get this project done?
For sure, for sure. So Zoop is a new crowdfunding site. They just started operating like this July, I think was their first campaign. So basically their idea is they want to create a curated comics only crowdfunding site. So that if you're someone like me, and probably a bunch of your audience, you can go and support a project there. But so on Kickstarter, right? And Kickstarter does a really good job. I'm not trying to throw shade at Kickstarter. But if I support a project on Kickstarter, there are a lot of comics projects. Kickstarter doesn't come out to me and then say, "Hey Connor, you supported this. Like, here's this other cool comics project." And so that's what Zoop wants to do. Zoop wants to say, if you support Trickster, then you're part of like the Zoop community, and they'll let you know because they're going to do a curated thing. It's only a couple of projects a month where they're like, "Hey, here's the next two things we're doing. Like we want to bring them to you because if it's your kind of, if it's your kind of weird, we want you to be able to support these as well." And so it was really interesting to us to not only be able to leverage our fans, but to have just this group of comics fans. And so really what Zoop's hoping to do is if if it works, they will have this really cool curated group of comics. They'll have this really dedicated community. And that if you're going to crowdfund on Zoop, you'll know that not only are you going to reach out to your fan base, but you're going to get all these comic fans who have been supporting projects are going to get to see yours as well. They're going to get these special exclusive offers for being part of the Zoop community. So it's like there's a bonus for signing up. And, as a Zoop community, you find out the projects first. And if you sign up, you're eligible to get certain things that nobody else can get. And so, yeah, we it's run by a couple people, Jordan Plotsky, Eric Moss. There's a few other guys who are part of it, Brett Schenker. Eric used to work at IDW. He was there when I was doing Kill Shakespeare. So, we go back a long way. Jordan is a very smart, talented entrepreneur. And, the other thing they do is, what they do for a creator is the deal is, they take a chunk of the money from the Zoop, but they do basically everything, right? Like, they set it up, they do the page, they do all the fulfillment, they handle the communication if you want. And so basically it's very turnkey. Like you bring the project and you still have to send your tweets and send your emails and spread the word, but you don't have to like labor away with all the other stuff. And Neil's done a ton of Kickstarters for TPub, and he was getting to that stage where he was like, I need to kind of find someone to manage these because it's great that I've got enough projects that I've got a bunch of Kickstarters, but that's all I'm doing. And so, yeah, we thought, it's really cool. It's something new and entrepreneurial. Why don't we jump in and see how it works? And so, yeah, that's why we got issue number 1. There's a couple of Zoop exclusive covers that won't be anywhere else. Andy Belanger's done one. Vincent Nico has done one. We've got one from Adam Gorham. And it's just a very, a lot of Canadian talent in there. And so, yeah, it was just kind of a cool thing to try out. I mean, I think it's going to work. They're really smart guys, but I just, nothing's guaranteed. But we thought, what, why not? Why don't we try something different?
Exactly. Well, we've talked about Trickster and The Last Witch. I'm wondering if you have any other projects that you can talk about that will be coming in the near future.
I would say this is kind of medium future, but I've been working on a project with a good friend of mine, Jabola Fagbamiye, who's a Nigerian Canadian. And we were working on a comics biography of a legendary musician by the name of Fela Kuti. Fela Kuti is someone who's not as well known over on this side of the world, but in the 70s and 80s, he was one of the biggest musicians in the world. He's based out of Nigeria. He's basically the African Bob Marley.
Okay.
He sings protest songs. He glorifies the joys of marijuana. He lived this crazy rock and roll lifestyle. He actually married 27 women at once.
Oh, my.
And when the media said, like, Fela, are you going to consummate your marriage with all 27 women tonight? Fela laughed and said, like, no, of course not. I married 27 women, not 7. And I'm like, even slow your roll even on 7, Fela. He lived a really interesting life. He was outspoken politically. We kind of pitched him as the original Black Lives Matters in the sense that he was talking about class and power. He was arrested over 200 times by the Nigerian military government. One time they beat him so badly that he swore he saw his spirit leave his body.
Oh
They
my.
burned down his commune. They threw his mother, who was in her 70s. And by the way, not for nothing, she was there when Nigeria negotiated their independence from England. She was in the room. She was one of the coalition. She was, one of the, some people called her the mother of Nigeria or the mother of Africa. And the soldiers threw her 80, I think 78 years old or whatever she was. They threw her out of a window, a second floor window, right? And she survived.
Wow.
Yeah, Fela's mom was tough. And so, yeah, it's just this really, it's almost unbelievable. So we're kind of doing a magical realism take on his life. We're mixing in some Yoruba spirituality into it. Jabola was born and raised in Lagos, which is where Fela had his studios and his concert venues. He grew up listening to Fela in secret because Fela was considered a radical, and a good middle class Nigerian boy shouldn't be listening to him. And so that's a book we're doing with HarperCollins with their Amistad imprint. Now that's where Jabola's about 90 odd pages of drawing into it. And it's a big book. It's an epic because his life was epic. So this probably isn't coming out for another year and a half, 2 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But we've started to post some imagery on our social media. And it's unlike anything I've ever done before, right? I mean, I've written a lot of magic stories like, Last Witch and Trickster and Kill Shakespeare and quest stories. And, I've done Adventure Time and regular show for comedy. But this was something entirely different. This epic biopic. It is very funny at times. It's very profane because Fela was a very profane man.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really a thumb in the eye to the notion of authority that wants to abuse authority, and to those in power who only want to be empowered to enrich themselves. Fela was calling these guys out 50 years ago by name in his songs. And and that's why the cops kept kicking down his door. So it's a crazy story, and we're really excited to bring it to everyone. It'll be a little while, but for people who maybe follow me on my social media, I'm the real Conor on Insta. I'm Conor McCreery on Twitter or Facebook. Every once in a while, I post updates. And Jabola's Jabola Studios, which is Jibola and then Studios, and he puts a lot of the art from there. And he's such a talented artist. The book is going to blow some people away when they see it.
Super. Well, lots to look forward to there, that's for sure. So, Conor, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Be good to each other. No, not entirely. I mean, I guess one thing that I forgot to mention was Zoop is, if you want to find Zoop, honestly, it's like zoop.gg / just type in Zoop, which is ZOOP, and then Trickster, TRICKSTR. Just type those two things into your search engine. The campaign will pop up at the very top. Like I was mentioning, we're doing the first issue, but it's going to be a 48-page comic. Now, 30-something of those pages is comic because we did a larger than normal first issue, but we also have like all sorts of cool back matter. We've got behind the scenes descriptions of the characters and the rules of the world. We've got a preview for the next issue in there. We've also got a fun little thing. Neil and I both write together, but we actually have totally different scripting processes. So we're going to include a couple of pages of each of our scripts with kind of explanations of why we do what we do. So if you're an aspiring creator or an aspiring artist, that's going to give you a look under the hood of not just like one way to do things, but two different ways to do things. Now, mine is obviously the best way, but it's worth looking at what Neil does just so you can not make the mistakes he makes.
Thanks to Conor for the chat. You can discover more about Conor on Twitter at Conor McCreery and on Instagram at The Real Conor, and that's one N in Conor. You can check out Trickster on zoop.gg-c-trickster. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.